This time on the Prop Master, I'm going to show you how I go about doing something that you probably have already done because you got tired of waiting for this video. All kidding aside, I really do feel like I need to apologize for how long this video has taken. I actually did start on it months ago, but then I got an emergency order for a whole bunch of these little proton backpack things for a group of people that apparently were not all interested in the number of Ghostbusters there actually were in the movie. I think I made about a dozen of these things. It did turn out pretty well. It lights up. Everything comes apart. If you're at all interested in something like this, I did actually record a video of this, and I'm going to put that on my Patreon account whenever I finally get that up and running. But back to this video. In this video, basically we're going to finally take all those little bits and pieces and we're going to put them together into something that actually kind of resembles Boba Fett, which is, you know, definitely a good thing. It's going to be the first video of 3 videos. And don't worry, I've already finished filming those videos. It's just a matter of getting the intros filmed, and I'll be able to get those all out in quick succession. And with all that to do, we better get started. When it comes to attaching your armor to the flight suit, you have some choices to make, once again. If you're in a hurry, if there's a big time crunch and you've just got to get it on as quickly as possible, like last year when I was working on this Sabine Wren armor for my daughter the night before Halloween, the simplest thing to do is to just take your hot glue gun and put a fairly liberal amount of hot glue on the back of the armor and just press it onto whatever you're going to attach it to and permanently attach it. Now, if you are going to use this method and just glue it directly onto the flight suit, then I would suggest not doing it at this point, and actually that would be the last thing you're going to do. That way you don't have to worry about putting the final paint on this while it's attached to the flight suit. If you do not have a form and you're actually doing this, you're going to want to make sure to put on a sweatshirt or something underneath here, because the hot glue is very uncomfortable if you're wearing it and you just stick this on. So you definitely want to, it's much better to have a body form. It's also going to be a lot easier for you to make sure it's in the absolute perfect position if you're on the, if you're out here attaching it on as opposed to, just trying to stick it on your body. Probably the most popular way to do things like this is going to be with Velcro or some other form of hook and loop. This industrial style grips really well. You're not going to have any problem with the armor coming off. The problem I have with it is that it grips so well that it grips better than the adhesive that attaches it onto the armor. So if you're going to go with that method, what I would suggest doing is don't use this type with the adhesive backing. You want to go with the non-adhesive backing style. And you want to go ahead and barge cement the back of your armor and one side of the tape, and then pull it apart and sew the other side into the flight jacket or flight suit, and that way you'll have that permanently attached. Then you want to go ahead and put the other part of the Velcro onto that. Make sure your armor is lined up perfectly and then place it on there. That way you'll make sure that the Velcro on the armor lines up with the Velcro on the flight suit. Once you do that, very carefully peel it off so that you don't just pull the Velcro off of the armor. And then that way you can then go back in and make sure that it's well attached. The problems that I have with the Velcro is simply that, especially with, this is basically one piece. It's pretty simple for Sabine Wren, but for Boba Fett, you're going to have lots of little pieces that all have to be perfectly positioned when you're putting this on. So the problem with Velcro is that you're going to have to very carefully position every one of those pieces every time you use it. If you take it off in between, then you're going to have to spend that time every time you put it on to meticulously place every one of those into the right place. A little different approach is you can use magnets, and it's pretty simple. If you take two little neodymium magnets, well, two for each location. For something like this, you'd probably want to do at least 6 of them along the outlines of your pieces. For Boba Fett's armor, you're going to want to put at least 3 magnets into each section of armor, possibly 4. But then you just basically glue them on the back side of, the inside of the flight jacket. And then when you put your armor on there, it'll just snap into the correct position like that. The downside is it can be kind of tedious getting these all attached to the armor, drilling the right size hole, getting it perfectly in there. Although these are small enough that it's really not going to be that critical. Some of the other things I've used magnets for, it had to be perfectly flush. You won't have that problem here. Now, the approach that I'm using kind of has the advantages of the magnets with just the ease of use as everything else, and that is I'm just going with snaps. The real advantage here over Velcro is that you don't have to worry about its position. Once you get this done, I can guarantee that that piece of armor is now in the right spot. I don't have to go in and measure and put it on and go back and forth with it. That is always going to be in the exact same spot on the flight suit. And the other advantage is, over just gluing it on, is that I can take it off now if I want to wash the pants. And snaps, are designed to be laundered. And you're not going to have any problems with the corrosion. And it's just, quick and easy. So that's why I want to go ahead and go with snaps. I've already put them on this side, but I'll go ahead and show you how to attach your armor. So in order to attach the snaps to your armor pieces, basically we're just going to attach the snaps to some fabric and then glue the fabric onto the armor pieces. And then of course we'll attach the other part of the snap onto the flak jacket or flight suit. Now for the knee armor, what we're going to need is snaps, 3 snaps and 3 pieces of material, as well as some elastic strap. Now the strap itself doesn't, this doesn't actually hold the knee pad on. What this is going to do is to gather up the flight suit at the knee, right behind the knee, so that it doesn't move up and down. So the snaps will keep this in position on the the flight suit, but then you don't want the flight suit moving around either. So this should hold the flight suit itself in position on your legs. Now, this is the snaps that I've gotten. Got these from Home Depot. You know, you can find snaps a million places. At a lot of hardware stores will have them. The home stores have them. Fabric stores have them. Walmart, you know, a lot of department stores, if they have a fabric section or a sewing section, will have them. And they're all pretty much the same, no matter what brand you get. You're basically going to have 4 pieces. You'll have this piece is called the button. This is the socket, and they go together. You have the stud, and it goes with the eyelet. So the stud and the eyelet we're going to put on the flight suit, and the button and the socket are what we're going to put together to do the armor. And then they're calling this an anvil. So again, you've got the sort of a curved surface for the button side, and this is kind of recessed with another piece that kind of sticks up. That you use this one for the eyelet side, and then this is just called the flaring tool. This one's a little bit more complicated in that it's just got some, you can hold it so this part can move independently of your hand. It's not really necessary. It's basically just a cylinder with a little tip that will help to guide these pieces to flare back around. You'll see it. I just went to the fabric store and bought the most durable fabric I could find. What you really want is the kind of thing that you'd find here. I've got a good sample right here. You know, the kind of fabric that they would use to make a nail bag, kind of, you know, this kind of a tarp material, but really, really rugged. This is ideally what you would want. This is very strong, but especially when I was using the pull the dot snaps, the way they attached just sort of frayed the material really badly. So it would tend to try to pull through. So what I did do on this one, and like I said, you know, just a single piece of this is actually extremely strong, and for these snaps would probably work just fine. But if it does feel a little bit flimsy to you, you can just take your material. And what I did here is I cut a long 2-inch strip, and then I used my barge glue to basically you know, put it down and then just folded it down the middle. So now I've got sort of a 2-ply piece that is extremely strong and durable. And then I've got it marked so I can cut it into 2-inch strips and get the same 1-inch by 2-inch pieces that as I have here, but in sort of double strength. And that was all it had to do with the way that the lift the dot snaps went together, and they just did a really good job of tearing up the material itself. These won't have that problem. You'll want a block of wood, or you know, just a good place to work from. I'm going to take my anvil here and just set the button part into there. I'm going to take one of my 1 by 2-inch pieces of material. This one's particularly kind of frayed, but and if you want to, you can get real serious and mark out the exact center of this, but I'm just going to eyeball it. And then you take this part here, and you want the, man, I can't seem to use my fingers today. You want to make sure that the concave part is facing out. Get that fairly well in position. Then take your flaring tool and you just want to put that into the little hole. I've just got a regular hammer here, and now all that's done at first is to basically cut through the material so that the snap part has punched through and is now into this part. Make sure that is, make sure that this part that sticks out is inside the part of the button. And what this is doing is it's basically just guiding that piece to bend back around and lock itself. So it's basically coming through this piece and then it's bending back around, kind of like a rivet, so that it can't be pulled out. And it should be secure. If it's not secure and is a lot of play between the two of them, then you want to put it back together and give it another whack. There's a little bit of play in there. I think that's going to be fine. So now basically I just have a button mounted in, the button part of the snap mounted into the 1x2 inch piece of fabric. Having a hard time with my descriptions today. And I want to make 2 more of those. So, once again, we got the button, fabric, and the socket. Get them lined up as well as you can. You can really feel it easier than you can see it. Make sure that this is getting into the button part that is sticking through the socket. Hold it in position and then just give it a few whacks. And you can definitely feel it when it cuts through the fabric, and then just give it a few more hits. Just check and make sure it's well attached. And that's number 2. Let's make 1 more. Okay, this is pretty well secured now. So now we have 3 of these. And we also want to have one for the elastic, but for that one we're going to do it a little bit differently. Because we'll have one that attaches this part on as well as this part. So we'll get to that in a minute. You want to take your 1x2 inch piece of fabric, and what I have been doing is just sort of lining the fabric up with this. Let's see this, we can see it, with this edge on this side and this edge here on this side. Got some little marks here that just I measured on the other piece just so they'd be the same. but it's really not that necessary. And then I'm lining the fabric up with the bottom of this piece of aluminum that is holding this rigidity here. As usual, this is just so that I'll know roughly where to put the barge glue, so I'll make sure I've got enough of it covered. Same thing here. Now for the center part, you just want to, it kind of helps if you hold it up against your knee. You kind of feel the part of your knee where nothing is really touching, because what you really don't want to do is to have a big bump right where your knee is going to be when you're trying to kneel down. The interesting thing about Boba Fett's knee pads, and I'll get into this later, is that when they're actually on your pants, your kneecap is not here in the middle like you'd expect it to be. It's actually about half above the top part of this and half, into this area here. And the reason is, then when you bend your knee, it actually ends up with this part on the ground and your knee sort of bending here. If your knee was actually in the middle, it really wouldn't cover your knee when you knelt down because of the way this is going to ride up with your pants. But I'll go into that a bit later. So what I found is, I want to say I put this about 1.5 inches up. Let me measure that. Okay, it's about 1.25 inches. So you can measure up 1.25 inches. And mark, and put a mark there. And it's like everything else, it doesn't need to be perfect. You're just trying to getting a feel of how much area you need to put glue down for. So there are my 3 areas marked out, and now I can go ahead and get some barge glue. Got my barge cement. Remember, you're going to be putting it on the button side, not the socket side. And we'll need 2 coats of glue on the fabric. We've already got all kinds of stuff on here, so it's no longer absorbent. So we'll just need to do 1 coat on here. If for some reason you don't have a bunch of resin stuff on the back of that, then you'll need to go ahead and do 2 coats. Go ahead and cover the button as well. And once again, just like normal, I do not have my gloves on. I want to make sure that you get it covered really well, because this is the only thing that's really keeping the button on. So there are my 3 pieces of material there. Once that cures, or once that mostly dries, we'll come back, we'll put a second coat on there, and we'll put 1 coat here, and then we'll be able to put them together. Okay, these are definitely dried up. But you know what? We probably should have gone ahead and done this piece, because this also has to be glued into place. And I went ahead and used one of these as well. Okay, so this is just regular elastic like you'll find at any fabric store. And you'll need to go ahead and measure it sort of around your own knee. I'm going to do 16 inches. Be careful you're not stretching it when you're trying to measure. So you'll definitely want to go ahead and test this on your leg as well. See if I can get my leg up here without having to move the camera and readjust. Okay, so here's my knee. This needs to be able to go behind your knee and not at the middle of your kneecap, but sort of this, almost where they would test your reflexes. And make sure they can wrap around there and be snug enough to sort of keep things from moving, but you don't want it so tight that it's going to be uncomfortable. So snug but not too tight. And that seems pretty good. So I'll be doing both halves of the snap. We're going to start off with the with this part here, not the button part. So let's put our anvil up here. Except we're going to flip it over because this is not the button side now. So we have this part that sticks up. But then we also have this part. I'm just going to line that up about like that. Just enough material past here that it's not going to rip out at any point. So this time we have two pieces of material basically that we're going to have to cut through. Let's see if this is up to the task. No problem. And for this, we want this to be completely solid. You don't want any movement at all. And it is completely solid. Okay. Now for the other piece, because this is going to wrap all the way around, it needs to be able to snap here. And you want it to be like that, not, you don't want it to be like that. You want to go ahead and complete a circle like that. So it's actually not on the same side, it's the opposite side. So that's on that side. This is actually on the back side. So we flip this over, put the button in there, leave that same 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch extra material there. So now these can snap together. and go ahead and glue up the back side here. Ideally, you need to go ahead and put this first coat on at the same time as the other pieces. I just got a little bit excited. And even though my gloves are sitting right here next to me, I didn't put them on. Because I like having stuff to pick off my fingers constantly. It's the reason why I have no fingernails. Tell you what, once I start messing with all the glue and everything, it just leads to keep going until I've pulled the skin off some parts of my fingers. Okay, so we'll go ahead and let this cure, and then we'll go ahead and attach the pieces onto there. This is good and dry now. Eventually, I will always remember to put on my gloves. Okay, you can also go ahead and mark this out. Just anywhere it's on this, not the big area here, but this little square here, rectangular piece here. Anywhere in this general area and up against, you want it on the aluminum parts. You want it to be up high. Find my pin that fell and mark this. And we'll go ahead and put our layer of barge cement on. Try not to get it too thick. You don't want it to be too thick, but you also want to make sure that you actually get some. You want to completely, coat it with some everywhere, because this is basically the only thing holding this armor on. Okay. Put our next coat on here. Again, you don't want this to get too thick either. You just want to make sure you get a good coat on. A nice smooth coat will be good. The reason why you don't want to get it too thick is because if you have a big glob there, instead of having a nice secure glued connection, you're going to have sort of a lump of just some of the glue, and that's a weak spot. Okay, and as soon as that dries, we'll go ahead and put everything together. Okay, looks good. Let's go ahead and get this one into position. Like I said, this one's really not all that important as to what spot it's in. Now we will most likely want to go ahead and trim this little extra off of here. My X-Acto knife has been abused. The main thing I'm trying to avoid here is just having stuff stick out over the edge. As long as it actually glues down into this area here, it's actually fine. What you don't want is for anything to be sticking, you know, up where it's going to be visible here. Got a little piece right there. Okay, so that takes care of this one. Again, I tried to line everything up with this edge and this edge. It really doesn't matter which one of these, they should all be roughly the same. You'll notice that with the button part behind here, this is no longer really 2 inches long. Plus, I'm sure it shrinks up a little bit due to the barge cement. Okay, so there's the snaps here. Now you notice now we have this bright white piece of elastic here. On the actual Boba Fett prop, the strap is clear plastic. So it kind of is invisible. And I want to have the same sort of effect here. I don't want to have, you know, the khaki gray flight suit and then this white stripe across the back. So you can find elastic that is a light gray, and if you do, I'd say go ahead and grab it. I couldn't find any this time, so I'm just going to grab a little white and a little black of my paint. Doesn't have to be any particular brand. So I put out some of the white, and I'm going to just get a little tiny bit of black. It actually looks fairly good. It's pretty close to the flight suit color. It doesn't have to be a perfect coat. You just don't want it to be a big white stripe. And I suppose gloves would probably be a good idea here as well. Do, however, wait for it to completely cure before you try to peel it off. So I've got that snapped on there. You're going to want to wait this for a couple of hours before you really try to stress this contact cement. So it'd be good to not snap it. I just peeled it up, but I just pushed it back down. In a couple of hours, that'll be secured a lot better. No matter how I set up the camera, you seem to get a lot of footage of the back of my arm. Okay, that's good enough. It's splotchy, but that kind of fits with what I'm going for. And we'll let that dry, and then we can go ahead and go to the second part of attaching these onto your flight suit. Okay, so before we start marking the location of where the knee pads are going to go, let's talk about sort of the fit of the suit. So if I just put on the flight suit, so here it is. These knee pads, or these pockets here, are very low down my leg. I don't think this is a manufacturing error. I believe that this is pretty accurate to the actual prop. From the photographs that I've seen, if you look closely, you can see where there's certain areas where there's lots of material sort of gathered together, and that's sort of the situation that we have here. So like I said, if I'm just standing here, these knee pads are basically right to the very top of my knees, and that would put the knee armor directly below them, which would be very convenient, but that's not even remotely how they actually fit on Boba Fett. To make things worse, the Achilles heel of the original prop has always been these knee armor pieces. That's one of the reasons why I decided to go ahead and snap them onto the suit. Apparently they had a handler whose basically job was to run around and move the knee pads into the right position after the actor had moved around a little bit. So in order to get these into the right place, what you need to do is sort of all of this material from the top of the pockets up to sort of your waist, or not really your waist, but where your legs stop. This all needs to be sort of gathered up so that you get basically a line that runs from this pocket across your crotch and then to this pocket over here. So this looks kind of ridiculous, but it also gets all covered up. So now we have everything's right along here in kind of a line. And also the flight suit itself should end right above the ankle. So now that you understand the position that the flight suit needs to be in before you mark the knee armor, let's go ahead and show you how to mark the position on the flight suit for the knee armor. So here's my knee pad or knee armor piece, and I'm just going to take some of that same latex or acrylic paint that I used to paint my strap. Which, by the way, thinking back, I think what I did last time was I probably used a silver paint pen on this. Not paint, like a silver Sharpie on this to get that color. I don't think I actually painted it, but whatever works. So it doesn't matter really what color it is. This is black. Unfortunately, I found you cannot use a paint pen for this because the ink just dries too fast and you won't get a good mark. So just give the snap a little coating of paint. Just that, outermost ring. I'm not really going to do it on this side because I've obviously already done it. But just, you can kind of bend your knees so you can kind of feel what you're doing. Get everything straight, and then kind of hold this apart so you don't get a big stripe. Hold it so that this is just above the knee. Pull that up just a little bit high, actually. Bring this in so that this is right in line with the very top part of your kneecap. Hold it in position, and then you can just pull it in so that this gets a good mark, and then push these in so that they'll mark. Now they're a little bit in the wrong place here because I've got snaps in the way and things, but you'll see that's the kind of mark you're going to get. So once you get these marked, go ahead and attach the snaps the way I'll show you in a minute, and go ahead and put this piece on, your first piece on. The reason for that is not only do you want this to be in, roughly the right position, it needs to be symmetrical in position with this one here. So it's not enough that it's pretty close to the same place. You don't want it to be like that, say, or that. You want it to be lined up if your feet are together. So get this one in position. Make sure that your suit is placed correctly, and then try to make sure that it is this side is even with your first side. Make sure everything's straight. And then you can go ahead and mark this one as well. I'm not worried about the marks that I'm putting on here because they're always going to be covered up with the armor. And I'm going to put plenty of marks on here afterwards just to, sort of weather it. And once again, I'm only worried about these three snaps, not the one with the strap on it. So let's make sure that everything is even. Spread this apart. Kind of get it in the right place. And I can go ahead and make my marks. It might be a good idea those marks are okay, but they're not the best. What I should have done, and what I meant to do, was to hold it in position. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, so take two on this. I've got everything even, got this knee pad in the right position. Both legs look to be the same. And everything is straight. So I want to go ahead and put this in position. I use my strap to kind of help hold it in place. Now I can put my legs together. Everything's even. Make sure that these are symmetrical as well. So that's the way I want it to be. So I can go ahead and hold that. I'm going to take a piece of tape. I'm just going to use a piece of tape. Stand up straight. And I'm going to run this around my leg at the right height. So that's just going to make it a lot faster and easier for me to line this up in the right place and at the right height. So now I can take this off. I can mark these snaps, or mark these snaps with my paint, and then go in go in a second time, and now I've got something to make sure that everything's in line. when I make my marks, pull them off, and now my marks should be cleaner and in the right place. Now that you have your flight suit marked, and I kind of went back, and believe it or not, those first marks that I made actually were pretty good. They're kind of messy, but they're pretty close to being in the right place. I went ahead and took a red paint pen and just sort of made a mark in the sort of where I decided the middle was. So you have your places marked where your snaps are going to go. I've got my block, I've got my 3 snaps, both pieces, plus the anvil and the flanging tool. Okay, so I have my block inside the pants leg. I've got the anvil and the eyelet piece, and it's not on the smooth side for the button, but it's on the back side where it has a little piece that sticks up. That'll help to hold this in place. Put this on top of the block. And just using my fingers, I can kind of line this up. Make sure there's not like a big wrinkle in there that you're going to secure in place by putting the snap on it. And let's be honest, it doesn't have to be perfect here, just, as close as you can get it. Okay, that feels good. Now I'm going to put the socket on top of there. Put the flanging tool. See, now I'm looking here and I can see that my red dot is not in the center, so it tells me I'm not in the right place. So I can kind of adjust that until I can see the red dot in the little hole of the socket. So place this in there. And these need to be very secure. You don't want these to be loose at all. The button side can be a little bit loose. It needs to be able to kind of almost pivot a little bit. But it doesn't have to. So this is not moving at all, so I know it's completely tight and secure on there. And we can move this over to the next spot. Put a new eyelet in, pointy side up. And move that around a little bit until I make sure that the little dot is right in the middle. Well, with any luck, that's in the exact perfect right place. Okay. So quiet snapping on there, I don't realize it's snapped on. And that's in position. And we'll find out in a little bit whether or not it's in the right position. By the way, just FYI, when I attached this the first time, and the reason early on when I tried to unsnap it and it pulled off really easy, it had nothing to do with the fact that the glue had not cured properly. It was all about the fact that I didn't realize that there was a thin coat of urethane and paint on this piece of aluminum, and so when I glued it on there, the glue just pulled that off of the aluminum. So what I had to do is I just went in there and I just cleaned off the aluminum to make sure that it was, you know, it was like this before, and I just had to clean all that off and make sure that it was like aluminum. Actually, I didn't have to clean much of it off because the glue pretty much pulled it straight off. So from there, I just basically put some more barge cement down, and it glued on really well. So the barge cement worked fine. It just was attached to something that, you know, pulled off. So make sure that your surfaces are clean before you. It's not really an issue here, but it will be an issue on that aluminum. Now that you have the knee pads done, you want to go ahead and repeat that process on the remaining armor pieces that go on the flight suit itself, and that is the codpiece and this back belt armor. I'm going to go with 3 snaps each. No, I'll do 3 snaps for the back belt here. One here on the tip, one right in the middle, and one on this end. And then I'll probably go with 4 on the codpiece. You know, one here, one here, one in the middle at the top, and then one down here at the very tip, just to make sure that everything stays, you know, tucked away. If it turns out I want to add more later, then I can just add some more snaps. But I think I'm going to go ahead and go with just 3 here and 4 there and see how it works. Okay, so I need, what, 7 more snaps. And, you know, just to throw things off, I keep flipping back and forth. This time I think I'm going to put the button side on the flight suit, on the inside of the flight suit. And I'll put this side on the armor itself. Not sure why. It just seems now that I think about it, it seems like this is going to have a better, just flatter attachment point to the armor. Whether or not that is true, I don't really know. I don't think it really matters, but this time that's the way I'm going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and separate my buttons. Move these over out of the way since I'm going to use these for the flight suit. And I've got my 1x2 inch pieces. This is the 2-ply that I went ahead and cut up. And let's just get to it. I need to go ahead and make all of these. This is actually a little different set of buttons. I picked these up at the, I think it was the fabric store when I got these. And I didn't notice they didn't have any of the hardware that came with them. They're just the buttons themselves. So I'm hoping that the same hardware that I've been using is going to work with them. Otherwise, I may have to go get some more snaps. Good and secure. That is nice and flat, but you know, whether or not it really makes a difference, I don't know. I'm going to move these somewhere where they don't bounce off, and we're just going to repeat this process until we have 7 of these. Now, if you have a punch, you can go ahead and punch a hole through here. Let's see what happens if I take a piece of wood. Just give that a little tap. See, now it's cut through there. So as long as you don't deform that piece so that it won't fit through, then you'll be fine. Nice and tight. Looks good. Now I'm going to repeat that process. So man, I am a klutz today. Okay, so now I can put my 4 pieces here. Okay, now if you want to get the snap closer than this actually is, you can cut some of this material off. The downside to that, of course, is that it's going to be weaker right where you want it to be stronger, because when you try to pull this off, it's going to have less of the fabric glued on here before it reaches the snap itself. And I don't want it to be too close because I don't want it to, I don't want to see the snap in here at all when this is, if this is peeled up a little bit. So I'm just going to cut a little bit off. Not my best pin. I'll call this one 1. You could, I suppose, measure, but I don't think it's going to be that important. I just want it to be roughly in the middle. And for 4, go ahead and cut this one as well. So this kind of I could have just put this there to begin with and then marked it on the back side before I cut it. Would have been a better way to do things. You can number them or letter them however you want. Okay, I'm going to see it straight across the top and then this comes down. So this is the top here. What I'm trying to decide right now is whether or not I want this to be more flat at the top and angled down, or if I want it more in the middle where it angles out so that I can move my back. I think it's mostly covered up. I think I'm still going to move this a little, instead of right in the middle, I think I'm going to move it up just a little bit. Roll this over. And even though I'm not going to put this right up against the edge, by doing it that way, at least you get a consistent, you get the same curve. Okay, now I can go ahead and get the barge cement and glue these up. I doubt these will absorb any more glue, but just in case, I'll go ahead and do a thin coat. Probably should have marked them on the back instead of the front. Take note of that. I think I'll go ahead and do that real quick. Definitely better off not painting the backs of the armor, just because if there's no paint there, the glue is going to stick a lot better. Or the glue will stick the same, but the glue will be stuck to the foam instead of to the paint, and then that way if the paint pulls off. I guess I should say you won't have to worry about the paint pulling off. Okay, we'll let this dry up and then we'll put on a second coat and then we can move on from there. Okay, so this dried and I put on a second coat and now that's dry, so we can go ahead and just put everything on. Not going to go in order because that would be too easy. Okay, so now we're ready to go through a similar procedure as we did for the knee pads and transfer the location of these onto the flight suit, and then we can go ahead and put the snaps on the flight suit. Okay, so to find your placement on the cod piece, we're going to do things a little bit differently than we did with the knee pads. But the first thing we're going to do is the same thing, is that in that we're going to get this pulled up where it goes. Then we can go ahead and get this into position. You want this to be quite, fairly tight down here at the bottom, because, once again, we're trying to gather up all this material where it's supposed to be. And then after that, what you want to do is kind of push all this extra material down under here, and then I want to straighten up so that I'm very comfortable standing straight up, and then I can reach down and find the snap with my finger and put my finger on the part of the flight suit where it lines up. And then I can make a mark right there, which I've actually already done on this. It helps to look at a mirror, but I went ahead and made my mark right there. Now, you want to measure a couple times, because the first time I measured was actually about 3/4 of an inch higher up. And the reason why you want to get this, all this material sort of shoved in there, is you want this to kind of help hold all that together. So once you have your top in the right place, you can reach down rather ungangly, find the spot down here and make another mark. Now, one thing that I have noticed that might be a design flaw is I put this one snap right in the middle here, and the zipper comes down past that. So I can either put the snap on this little flap that covers the zipper, or your other choice is to do 2 snaps, one on either side, or you could probably get away with just moving the snap over to the left, an inch, and snapping it over there. I think I'm just going to go ahead and put the snap here in the middle. I don't think that's really going to be a hindrance. I think there's enough material here. Yeah, there's clearly enough material there to put a snap. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that, and I think that's going to be fine. If I need to use the restroom, I'll still be able to undo the bottom snap and kind of pull this out and then unzip the zipper. So I think it's going to work. But that's something you might want to consider, is you might want to go ahead and put 2 snaps on here, an inch or 2 apart, instead of this center snap in the middle. Now, once you have these marked, get those lined up, you just want to reach over and find where this hits. Now, you might want to lift this up a little bit, make sure it's in the right place. And then what you don't want to do is to snap this, or put the snap underneath all this extra material. So you want it to be above that. And it doesn't really matter where it falls, where the sides fall, because this is all going to be covered up by other stuff and really not visible. Once again, you want to stand up straight before you mark it. And repeat the process on this side. Once again, I'm just making sure that everything is where it's supposed to be. Okay, and I've got that marked. And we can go ahead to put the snaps on here. Now that I have this marked, and this would definitely be a good time that if you have access to somebody who is close to the same size as you and they can put this on, and you can, you know, double check your measurements on somebody else, that would definitely come in handy. For me looking at this, there are some issues, mostly that I've got this mark here is a little less than 2 inches from this seam, and over here it's a lot closer to you know, 2.5 inches. Now if you'll notice, the seam is not perfectly straight. It looks to be about 1/4 of an inch off. It's lower by 1/4 of an inch on this side than it is over here. But even with that, there's a pretty big discrepancy. So probably what's happened is when I was taking my measurements, the whole codpiece got cocked to the right. So even if I measure with that extra 1/4 of an inch, it's 1 3/4 on this side and 2 1/4 on this side. So it's a 1/2 inch difference. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this one down 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to raise this one up 1/4 of an inch. And I think that'll fix it. Now I can go ahead and put my snaps in place. Okay, so I have my stuff here. Go ahead and, I can't even use a Sharpie anymore. Now make sure, if you're doing yours like mine, make sure that you get the zipper well out of the way. I want the smooth side because we're putting a button down. It looks like I need to slide this over just a little bit. I can see the red dot. Nice and secure. And we can move on. Okay, And now the last one. Now you need to make sure that you're not, you've got all this fabric kind of wadded up, so when you do this, make sure you don't have another piece of fabric kind of folded in behind here. Now I've got a lot of seams coming together, so there's a ton of fabric back here. What you really want to avoid is finding out that there's, over here has been pushed underneath, and so now you've got a hole that comes through over here, or that you've actually, put that into the snap. So as you can see here, there's quite a mass of stitching there. So what I'm going to do is, in fact, my mark is just off to the side of the seam, so that's where I'm going to go ahead and put it. It didn't quite feel right. And the snap looks a little distorted. I'm not sure why. Probably because this got a little bit of that got in there, but I think it's all there, and it's definitely secure. So there we go. So now we have that piece on. So I'm ready to go ahead and put the snaps on for the back armor. And I got to tell you, from this, hodgepodge of marks all over here, it was difficult. The basic premise is I went ahead and put the codpiece on, put the flight suit on, and then I took a belt. I took my regular belt from my pants and I wrapped it around the top part of the codpiece. Trying to find that. Because you have Boba Fett has kind of an Obi style award belt that he has, and he's got a utility belt that sits on top of that as well. But both of them sit on top of this part of the codpiece and cover this up. And then in the back, it covers up the top part of the back armor as well, and just leaves the bottom part sticking down below. So I needed to have something that could help to portray that line. And then it was just a matter of tucking this in underneath that belt until I got a place that looked good. Trying to use mirrors and things like that. And I ended up the green ones first, trying to mark it myself, and that was difficult. And then the red ones, I came back and did it again, but tried not to mark it while I had the belt on. And that also was difficult. But finally, I just had my wife. Sometimes you just have to get somebody else to do it, especially when you're dealing with your back. And I got her to go ahead and mark with the black ink the precise positions of the snaps. And you'll notice it's higher up than the snaps are in the front for the codpiece, and that's just because when you pull all that material up to get the pockets to go up on the pants, it's going to pull the back of this down somewhat. So it actually does pull this rides down further than would in the front. So as you pull that material up, this gets pulled down a little bit, and so you want. That's why I wanted to go ahead and use the belt so that I could actually get that that feeling. And you want to use as wide a belt as you've got. If you've got a really big, thick, wide work belt, then use that. So that's how I got these positions. So let's go ahead and put those snaps in. And you know, if I don't like it, I can always, it's probably not going to be an easy thing to take the snaps out, but I can just put another snap above it or below it and it'll be fine. I'm going to go through the pants leg to get to the inside. And similar to the front, there's a lot of material. That looks good. I can see the black dot through the hole. Okay, let's move over to this side. This one's going to be quite a bit easier because I don't have that big flap of fabric inside to worry about. Now, because of the way fabric is on your body, you can't really just lay this down on here and take your measurements, because there's a certain amount of, I'm trying to how to describe this. There's a little bit of gathering that takes place with the material. So the distance from here to here and here to here is slightly longer than the actual distance between the snaps here, because there's a little bit of a difference in length that they travel. You have to actually, you know, lay the piece in position and get your measurements that way. That looks good. Looks good. Okay, and then when we actually have this on, there'll be a couple of belts that run across here, and you'll just be able to see this bottom part. And that's it as far as putting armor onto the flight suit. Now we have to worry about the flak jacket. You can see on here, by the way, for the front, that I went back and I decided that this was too low after I put it on and messed with it a little bit. It just seemed really obvious this was too low, so I went ahead and put a second one on, an inch higher, and that's absolutely fine. There's no real reason to take this one off, and you never know, at some point, for some reason, I may want to move it back down. It'll still be there. Okay, and now we can move on to the flight jacket. But I'm afraid you're going to have to wait for the next video for that. I know we haven't covered that much in this particular video, but look at it this way. You've now learned the basic techniques that you'll use for the rest of the armor on this project. And don't worry, if the other videos aren't already out, they will be in the next day or two. As always, if you have any questions or comments, just post them below and I'll do my very best to answer them. Hey, if you liked this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And of course, subscribe so you can catch all the rest of the videos. Or you could even click that little bell so you'll know as soon as the next videos are posted. So until next time, thanks.